Genshin Impact takes place in the fictional world of Teyvat on a specific unnamed continent. This continent contains 7 nations themed around the several elements that build this aforementioned world, and these nations are each ruled by one single god that strongly resonates with and controls their respective element, referred to as Archons. The community of this game itself always enjoys ranking things, whether it be characters, those nations I mentioned, or even more odd things like trauma. In today's video, those Archons will be ranked from 1st to 5th, as only 5 nations currently exist within the game. As the game takes place from the traveller's perspective, it only makes sense to begin with the first nation's Archon, Barbatos.
Don't be afraid. It's alright now. I'm back.
Is he talking to a dragon?
Who's there?
To be able to rank Archons, by the way, we gotta talk over a few things. It's important to explain the personality, backstory, role in the main story, and things I of course like and dislike about everything mentioned. The characterization and linking to the story's main themes are very important as well. Okay, time to begin. Venti is a free spirit that clearly represents both his element and the youthful nature of his very nation, if you could even refer to it as such. It's difficult to call the place his as he departed from his own nation out of a desire to maintain the notion of freedom, due to how he had personally grown up. Venti was but a small spirit of the wind who had found a friend in a young boy in the old Mondstadt that was ruled by the god of storms Decarabian. Tyranny was an extremely common thing as a wall of highly pressurized winds and hurricanes surrounded the place, and once war broke out from Decarabian's underlings in pursuit of freedom, Venti was irreversibly thrown into it as well. His friends had died during the battles taking place within Mondstadt, though Venti himself lived to see the conclusion of the war, Decarabian's treason, and even though they won, Andreas, a companion of his, didn't desire the role of the Anemo Archon, passing it down to Venti instead. After this exposure to the consequences of limiting one's citizens and rejecting the need for freedom, naturally Venti took doing the opposite extremely seriously, to the point of, as mentioned, leaving his nation to effectively fend for themselves, doing the opposite of Decarabian. This was fine up until the people themselves began to restrict each other's freedom on a more human level, due to things like selfishness, the desire for power over others, and basic advantageous behaviours with superiority. Things like the Lawrence clan show these problems at hand throughout the history of Mondstadt on the forefront, and Venti did come back indirectly to stop these things as it went against his vision of freedom for the nation. Venti may be funny, laid back and chill, but he can be serious as shown in the last parts of his story quest as well, where he effectively relays his backstory to the traveller to a somewhat vague extent. He's frequently criticised in the main Archon quest as well, specifically by characters such as Paimon and La Signora for his absence, but after seeing his backstory and demeanour when bringing it up, it helps rationalise and put everything into perspective a bit more. Most people really dislike him, but I don't. I mean, he's got an appropriate level of backstory that shows early on the backstories for characters in this game have interesting levels of depth, on top of it being an Archon. The Archons aren't being forgotten to any capacity in the realm of depth and detail, not serving as just main objectives for each nation. There's a lot on Durin, Devilan, and specifics of his behaviour in game, but overall I like him. He is far more basic than the other Archons, however, so I'll be putting him in 4th place of the 5 Archons in this video. Despite his clear personality, he just comes off as bland and generic like his nation, definitely due to the time of his release. It's hard to ignore the unique details of him helping the Adeptus Zhao though, or having a fun prank-filled friendship with our next Archon, Zhongli.
Mustered his Adepti to restore peace to the land. They say that before he set out, he spoke these words.
This may be pure copium, but I really love Liyue. Maybe I should move to China or something because the music, scenery and everything is peak. Though we're talking about the Archons and boy is Zhongli the opposite of anything you'd expect after meeting Venti. I mean, to be fair, the nation prioritizes foiling the established characteristics of Mondstadt alongside being as refreshing as possible. Watch my video on that. His personality is of course stone cold as he's the eldest of the Archons. This definitely corresponds with his rock stuff, and like every Archon, has some real trauma in his backstory. Whether he's known as the god of history, the stove, commerce, or contracts, he's had his moments of weakness. During the Archon War, Zhongli was more battle-oriented, hence his title War God in some Liyue plays, and less understanding of humans, though there was no need to fret as Guizhong, a second god also taking care of Liyue, assisted. She was more intelligent and less strong, being like the opposite of what Zhongli was at this time. She had a massive impact on the guy as they were most likely lovers, and unfortunately, she passed away by his side. It's suspected Ningguang is a reincarnation or releases some link to her, as Zhongli began learning the nature of humans and eventually taught Ningguang things that Guizhong taught him. This is significantly more tragic than Venti's backstory in my opinion, as Zhongli wasn't some wind spirit during this or anything. He was himself, Morax. They even have a field in Liyue that is a combination of the two names, which is really sweet but sad. Zhongli values contracts, possibly because of his close connection to Guizhong, but that's speculation on my part. Supposedly this is due to his creation of Liyue Harbour, so this may just be a case of his nation linking to his infatuation with contracts and fair exchange, which is a little less interesting when compared to Venti's reasoning for his freedom stuff. Zhongli's role in the current storyline is significantly more interesting, however, being a twist Archon that also interacts with the legend's Archons, causing me to clock him in at 3rd place. I know big things are going on. I just think Zhongli is more tolerable, more interesting in game and in Mac's story, and his wife becomes a ballista or whatever it is. Also, I like his nation more. Damn, this video is gonna wind up being so short. I guess this is just a chill one, though I think it'll start moving slower and slower as we get into the newer, more in-depth Archons. And something else that moves slower and slower is the nation of Inazuma, in the Raiden Shogun's pursuit of eternity.
In the land of the Narukami, centuries pass without change. Deep in the heart of the city stands the lofty abode of the Raiden Shogun. She looks down upon her realm at mortal joys and woes, and sees a world mired in impermanence. By mighty lightning, she rules over the transients. Trivial yearning and petty passion, they vanish like a mist, but the Shogun pursues, unfettered and unperturbed, eternity.
I'll spare your time by sharing my base opinion on it now, since this is a ranking video first and foremost. I heavily dislike this Archon as she causes trouble for her nation, the plot within the base game, and even makes Sumeru a pain as well because of the Scaramouche, but I'll get into the nitty and gritty details of it later on in this section, since it's important to establish her backstory in order to properly analyse and criticise her for the sake of this video. So the flow of her backstory is actually quite impressive. Firstly, she began as a samurai underneath the original Archon, Raiden Makoto, that would constantly attempt to be better. She remained as cold and unempathetic as she is now, much like Zhongli without the humanity and understanding. And she even had a group of friends around her as she constantly improved. A was always afraid of the future, which Makoto always disagreed with, believing in the normal route of enjoying time while it still lasts. However, all these worries would bubble up when A held the dying Makoto's blade in her hands, becoming the new Raiden Shogun. It's somewhat understandable why she had an infatuation with eternity, considering her lack of assistance with her future-related anxieties, alongside all her worries being confirmed upon her twin sister's death right in front of her. I don't like her, but it's good regardless. The development in her backstory to me is really nice, and I'm all about a tragic hero or descent into insanity story. After that, you could consider her a tyrant with things like the Vision Hunt Decree and more all going on in order for the nation to stay the same, living true to her vision of eternity. She made a puppet and began meditating in her mind effectively, one of the failed puppets being pretty much thrown away to fend for himself, who became an antagonist in this chapter of the game alongside chapter 3, which really solidifies A as a nuisance to the world of Teyvat for me. The dude became his own Archon for a while as well. Like, what the hell was she thinking, man? Clearly she didn't like and subscribe to Just T with 3 bubbles. She is the main antagonist of chapter 2, interestingly enough, despite her role as an Archon. This never happens in any other nations unless you want to count Furina as an antagonist. She then has 2 story acts that help her redeem both herself and the nation, and maybe if I played them I'd like her more. However, I don't know. I appreciate her appeal as nostalgia and the desire to return to past memories is growing more frequently within human society, but yeah, I just can't. 5th place for me personally. I do enjoy how she feels a bit closer to us than Zhongli and Venti through her dual act story quests, as well as her more honest demeanour and respect for honour. It's significantly more trustworthy and really benefits the development of the story, regardless of how boring I personally find her and Inazuma as a whole. She's good at what she does, kinda. She just isn't my taste and I find her a little pointless, but maybe her importance will grow like Scaramouche's relevance in the next section, Sumeru.
Who would have thought the world would be so eager for my birth? I remember you, Booer, the god of wisdom, and standing beside you, the traveler.
Sumeru is the best nation, capturing the adventurous charm of Genshin with more refined and improved storytelling and depth. This goes the same for the Archon Nahida, who has a very coherent backstory that I'm confident I won't even need to revise for the sake of this video. Her role in the main story is also very easy to recite, because naturally Sumeru was just that great. She's smart, caring and sweet, but also naive at times, as well as being somewhat childish. These 5-act nations definitely have improved Archons as well, and once I get into talking about this one, it'll be clear why. Nahida was born as a reincarnation of sorts from the original Archon Rukkhadevata, as she possessed forbidden knowledge corrupting Irminsul, the source of all knowledge throughout Teyvat. Nahida was celebrated initially by the people of Sumeru, but locked away in the sanctuary of Siristana for 500 years, as this happened around the time of the Cataclysm, unsurprisingly enough happening within the confines of Sumeru due to Khaenr'iah's whereabouts. Nahida didn't do very much besides attempt to interact with the nation's citizens, desiring to still fill her role as an Archon as best she could from a significant distance. She's a genuinely good person who was wronged, but can be a little dumb sometimes. As I said, she has flaws which makes her very 3D. Of course the other Archons do, but she's at more of a balance and isn't made to be extremely important 24/7. She's an objective in the story, yes, but it isn't the most important thing. It's multifaceted with Azar, Scaramouche and Dottore all existing as well. Her journey of self-discovery isn't annoying like A's, and she didn't do it herself completely, instead simply being put in the wrong situation and making a few flawed decisions, which unlike A, were far more justified and explained. She speaks on her ambitions to bring the desert, education and more, acting on it in an admirable and respectable way. She fixes A's mistake even though she was really only enabled to be an Archon very recently at the time, helping Scaramouche find himself and make friends to appreciate life more. And respect the concept of human emotions. A's been around for so damn long, and yet Nahida fixed a big problem she left behind in a few days effectively. Nahida is a legend and is my favourite Archon, even being a part of the Traveller's main group with Paimon and by extension Scaramouche now. First place for me. While every Archon befriends them, Nahida says she will continue searching and helping them out. Another character that does this is one in Fontaine, Neuvillette, though this section will be a little complicated compared to the rest. The reason this is complicated is because of what happens in Act 5 of the main Archon quest Chapter 4. However, this can all be covered in chronological order, so let's get a move on all the way back to the first Archon of Fontaine, before Focalors or anyone else. Khaenr'iah, the original one, ruled over the nation while it was filled with oceanids instead of people, and manipulated primordial seawater within their bodies to become substitutes for human liquids like blood and more, making them into land-walking people. This was considered a sin by the greater universe of Teyvat, covered in the prophecy circulating around the nation during the events of the main story. This sin created what was effectively an unshakable curse or dosage of karma upon both the people of Fontaine and the next Archon Focalors, who dedicated her life to stopping it. She created a human counterpart who acted as the god of Fontaine for 500 years, while Focalors, the real god, schemed a way to surpass this curse. Furina is only a human with what I guess is some form of relation to the real god. The reason I bring up Neuvillette is because he's a dragon sovereign like Dvalin from Mondstadt, and it's revealed that an Archon's power is but a part of a dragon sovereign's, stolen from them. Focalors sacrifices herself to save Fontaine during Act 5, restoring power back to Neuvillette in order for him to save the nation, effectively becoming the Archon. I do still want to talk about Furina though. She shares a lot in common with Venti, being very expressive and energetic, yet only pretending to be carefree and laid back. Her relationship with Neuvillette is also another similarity to Mondstadt, as Venti and Dvalin are close much like Furina and Neuvillette, though they swap roles within the main story of the game itself. This mirroring creates a sense of nostalgia and helps us players realize how far the game has come, already making them better than Venti by default. They both fit the themes of Fontaine perfectly, as well as their heavy focus on morality, netting themselves some bonus points. Most of Neuvillette's notable story occurs after the main plot of Fontaine, but he's in the same boat as Nahida when it comes to reliability. He is under no obligation to hide information from the Traveller and does things of his own free will, helping me justify his placement as second under Nahida. This placement is also Furina's, as I'm pairing them together. Her tragic plot of needing to play a role for 500 years is very interesting and reminds me of Nahida, of course allowing me to put her in second as well. Her personality is interesting, and she'll remain relevant for a long time, though I definitely like Neuvillette more out of the two. He utilises the mystery and plot twisting of Zhongli, while utilising the, well, utility, morality and ambition of Nahida, even wanting to bring equality to Melusines much like how Nahida does with the Desert Dwellers. Furina has ambitions of bettering herself and clearly wanting to stay important, even receiving a vision from Neuvillette. Nahida and the Fontaine duo bring a lot to the table in terms of lore and assistance throughout the story, which is awesome, as seeing the stakes grow more extreme as the story nears its climax is incredibly appropriate, helping me really anticipate what will happen with Natlan's Archon, because we can't cover the last two.
Past battles. The gods goad us on with the promise of their 7 treasures, rewards for the worthy, the doorway to divinity. Yet buried in the depths of this world lies smoldering remains, a warning to those that dare trespass. That throne in the sky is not reserved for you. But mortal arrogation never stops. None will escape the flames. See for yourself.
We don't know much about these two besides their names, and that they're female, and that they're both newer generation Archons unlike Venti and Zhongli. Natlan is all about dragons, so Murata might be a bit like Venti and Furina in terms of dragon sovereign relevance, and I have a suspicion that the Tsaritsa will have the softness of Nahida, hostility of A, and a close dynamic with Zhongli. Don't forget how she dislikes Venti either. Okay, that's a brief thing, let's conclude.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. I spy a new friend.
Sorry if this was lackluster in any way. I've been very fatigued recently, so getting invested in a script hasn't been particularly easy. With that said, I still hope you enjoyed it, and I'll redo this later this year for Murata. Like, subscribe, join the membership, and goodbye. Have a good day, have a good night, whatever time it is for you. And yeah, bye.